Hi, everyone, and welcome to Intelligence and Noise, the GSMA Intelligence podcast, where we try to take a look at what's going on and tell you why it's important and maybe stuff you're not paying attention to. Try and sort through some of the noise there, add a little bit of our own intelligence, hopefully point you to some of our research along the way. For a second week in a row, I am joined by Pau Castells. Hey, Pau.
Hello, hi, Peter.
Pau is here while Tim is trying to figure out how to get back from Belize. We haven't heard from him. I really assume that means he's not fleeing justice, but I guess we will find out. I am Peter Jarich. I'm the head of GSMA Intelligence. I should have mentioned that to you before. For those of you who don't know what we do here, one, I don't know how you found us, so congratulations for making it here. But the basic idea is we take the GSMA CEO newsletter. And if you're on that list, congratulations. It means you're important. If not, don't worry. We got you covered. We take a look at some of the news that was in that CEO newsletter, tell you why it was important, add a little bit of context to it, maybe our own spin, but then also talk about some of the things that maybe should have been on it, but weren't. So that's what we'll be doing over the next half an hour or so with maybe a few extra things sprinkled in. We'll probably talk a little bit of sports at the end because Pau's beaming inside. You can't tell it, but we'll cover that off. I always begin with a little bit of context, a story. I'm going to call it a bit of self-serving. Peter gets to tell a story time. That hopefully sets the context for some other things we're going to talk about. So last year, and I usually do this or get in this mindset every time I get ready to take my summer holiday in August, I decided I'm going to get a new phone. I'm going to try something out. I'm going to try and go for low mid tiers. So if I hurt it and don't put a case on it, it's going to be fine. And so I did that, got myself a perfectly serviceable Motorola Edge 60 Pro, and it's worked out well for a year. And as I said, I would try it out without a case. And if you try it out without a case, you're doing that because you know you're not going to be losing too much if you risk it when it breaks. And of course, it broke, fell out of my pocket, fell onto concrete ground. Nice. I'm now one of those people you see and go, "Come on, dude." Like really, that's a horrible screen. What are you doing? And how have you not hurt your fingers? So I thought, okay, time to do exactly what I thought and look for a new phone. And right on cue, the good folks at Motorola have launched their Edge 70 Max. And what was interesting, I was like, cool. It also looks mid tier. I can make that easy shift. And then you start looking at things, right? Year ago, the 60 Pro had 3 cameras. Now the 70 Max has 2. It's got a new, faster SoC. It's got a cool Qualcomm chip, not quite the newest, but serviceable. No eSIM, bigger battery, supposedly brighter, but no 16 gig of RAM option. Worse selfie camera. But it's got sort of the wireless charging with the magnets. And what I realized is that you've got this interesting set of trade-offs here, right? That, okay, maybe the price is the same to a little bit higher. And how do we keep the same price, same and higher, despite the fact that memory is gone through the roof? Well, maybe we limit some of the higher end memory options. We take away one of the cameras, we downgrade one of the cameras, we maybe distract people by throwing in a bigger battery and throwing in some the magnets in the back. And when I say distract, I'm not denigrating the good folks who put these folks together. But these are the decisions that need to get made because, as we know, smartphone prices are going to be getting higher and higher and higher because memory has gone through the roof. And that, my friends, leads us into the CEO newsletter. So, Pow, I think we're going to talk about both the stories that made it in because they're both important. But I think the one leadoff one was around device costs, and it's a bit of a fun one, right? Because it kind of gets to talk about all of our friends at other research firms and what they were doing. So it was Counterpoint calling out the 11-point drop in phone shipments, lowest shipments for the quarter since 2013 due to memory costs. this is not news, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that actually, and your Peter story intro, I think it sort of sets the scene pretty nicely, because this actually is a pretty interesting story that continues to build on a trend, which is that AI is making smartphones more expensive, right? And it's not the most obvious connection to begin with, but I think you all know the story here. AI has put a lot of pressure on memory, on chips, and that's crucial component of smartphones. And this sort of classic supply side shock in economics. And I am an economist, so here's my economics talk. This is actually resulting in higher prices for smartphones, which is resulting in, or it's contributing to this slowdown in sales, right? So that's what Counterpoint research was calling out in their news.
What I think is interesting, just a quick jump in there is I mean, so that was from Counterpoint, but, if I look at also from, some of the other research that's out there, you see this just the amount of a phone and the bill of materials that is down to memory is just, is just doubled in some cases. But what's particularly interesting is it's taken a big hit on, let's say, the lower end of the market. Right, we're at the higher end of the market where you've got those multiple cameras, right? And maybe you've got a particularly impressive screen or everything else. There's a little bit of a room for sort of building some of that in. But we're at the low end where it is more stripped back. The impact of that rise on memory side of things is just crazy, which I think for some of our efforts, right? I know you work with the folks that we all do on the device accessibility side of things, has to be just a big hit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it does have, as you are explaining, Peter, it does have actually pretty significant implications for the lower end of the market, which then gets into questions around digital inclusion, right? So is this creating or making the challenge to connect the unconnected more difficult? And clearly the answer has to be a resounding yes. I mean, we do have, as a proportion of income for the lower income populations, the smartphone costs are increasing a lot more than they are increasing for the higher end of the population, right? So this,
Yeah,
being one of the main barriers for connectivity, and we do in our own GSMA intelligence surveys generally find that, right, that handset affordability is one of the main barriers to connectivity for those that do not have yet a connection to the internet. It it clearly becomes a challenge. I mean, I think one aspect that is probably, and here I'm talking or playing a bit more, crystal ball, futuristic type thoughts, right? So we have clearly AI putting lots of pressure on memory chips, and that's pushing up device costs. We also have, and we saw news from Ericsson last week that they are seeing AI impacting also the costs of equipment, and they semi-announced a potential increase in prices for the equipment they are selling. Right. So again, if vendors are passing through these costs and pass them on to operators, then potentially the connectivity itself might become the service itself might become also more expensive, right? So we have this
that's a
potential
that's a f- that's fair.
change in
It's it
in paradigm, right? Where
it's a
we
yeah. I mean, it's a good reminder, right? Because the handset side of things is, I mean, it's in the news because it touches everyone, right? Because we can all see that again when you break your phone like me, or you're just looking to get a new phone, we can all see that. But it's like a reminder, and I think to your point, it's not a bit of crystal ball crazy as much as just pulling out the reality that memories in everything, right? Memories, it's not just in phones, it is in everything. So it should be impacting all different parts of the digital ecosystem. So yeah, I mean, when do you think we'll start? when do you think we start to see how that flows through, right? If it's impacting network costs, if that has an impact on the actual service cost down the road, is that a next year
Yeah,
thing, 2 years from now?
let me just consult with my crystal ball, and I'll get back to you after that. Um, no, but I think it's sort of, that we have lived for the last 2 decades in a world where we have almost taken for granted that connectivity costs are coming down, right? We this has been a deflationary sector. Connectivity costs have come down. Devices have also come down if you compare them on a sort of apples with apples, right? So, or if they have not come down in price, they have increased their quality. So this has been a trend, and a very, very, very strong trend. Um, what we might be now seeing is potentially a stop to that, right? We might see, especially if AI continues to push through, we might actually see for the first time, actually connectivity prices might not be coming down as quickly as they have been coming down before, and same for devices. So, um, yeah, I'm not going to put a timeline to that, and I'm hoping that this can be reversed, because obviously the supply side on the memory chip side of things will also react to that and hopefully increase capacity, etc. But yeah, I mean that's one of the potential unintended effects of the AI boom, that it's making connectivity more expensive.
Yeah, it really is. Like, and it's interesting because to your point about sort of the AI of this all, right? So, if you look at our consumer survey, you look at our latest data that we've got, the interesting part is, when you ask folks about what they want in their devices, AI capabilities is near the bottom, right? They want strong battery, they want a durable phone, lower cost, camera quality towards the top, right? So it does go to that initial trade-off discussion that I was sort of talking about there of if I'm a maker, how I think about this. But then if you realize that a lot of these costs are the impact of AI being driven somewhere else, knowing how people feel about that, right? That across societies, there's growing questions about how people are looking at AI. I've seen no shortage of ads all over that say, "Hey, people hate AI," or "We hate AI," or "We don't like AI." So you're seeing this backlash. It'll be fun to see what happens if something that people seem to be more and more disposed to dislike ends up causing them higher prices elsewhere. I guess is one more reason to dislike it. But it'll all be okay, right, Pau? Because if we can use AI to actually make our networks more efficient, and be better with networking, then maybe it can keep costs in check. And that's my ever so not subtle connection to the second story that graced people's inbox in the CEO newsletter, which was a focus on AI RAN. And this was led in part by some work. The smaller piece of the news being some work in Korea, and a bunch of different launches there taking place actually with Ericsson, Nokia, Samsung, KT, SKT to launch some trials of AI RAN. But probably the bigger news being Nokia's launch of an AI RAN solution. Again, we know that they've been a big supporter of AI RAN, so not too surprising there. But sort of work with NVIDIA Silicon, their own software, 3 different models, either a capacity plugin for their existing solutions or a standalone node or total cloud native. Um, Fair to say the big tagline there, 100%, 100% increase in spectral efficiency by 2028. I mean, if that happens, right, then telcos are going to be saving money in the end, right?
Well, I mean, I think obviously, and there is the hope that this actually materializes, but it needs to be tested in commercial networks, and I'm sure that many operators have heard all this before, and will probably approach this with a degree of caution. But yeah, with that caveat or remark aside, I mean, this is actually pretty impressive numbers that we're talking about here. If not just that doubling of spectral efficiencies, but even if just a fraction of that materializes, that's really impressive. And it's when we have moved from say 3G to 4G and 4G to 5G, we have seen improvements in spectral efficiency, but they have been becoming a bit more challenging to obtain. Obviously, MIMO has helped a lot recently, but still, I mean, yeah, it is actually quite an impressive figure.
Yeah, I think the interesting part for me, I think if I look at this and I look at these stories together, two pieces. One, we're going to be using this term AI ran a lot, right? It's going to be out there, but what it means is different for everyone, right? I mean, so obviously, again, in the Nokia case, you're talking about running their software on essentially AI silicon as well as some silicon solutions that they're building, third parties with Marvell. But that's different than like what you see in Korea, which is more of just, hey, here's a bunch of use cases of physical AI. It seems to be focused more on the use case side of things. I know that Ericsson in the past have talked about, hey, we're using AI in the RAN, we're building AI into our radios that can do things in silicon and you don't need GPUs. Uh, I think we're going to be in for, the classic, no, I shouldn't say I think we all know we're going to be in for this next round of people tossing this phrase around AI RAN. Uh, and that's, I think, the one takeaway. The second takeaway is people, meaning vendors, throwing it around with an exception of some clear, uh, seems like some folks who aren't, which is the Chinese, right? We're not seeing this from Huawei. We're not seeing this from ZTE. Again, it's not surprising that in South Korea it was Samsung, Nokia, and Ericsson. But the fact that we aren't hearing a lot about this from the Chinese either says we're going to see something soon. They're preparing something, or it's just reinforcing the idea that there's been these chip embargoes. There's been a lack of access to a lot of the silicon that has been required for some of this. And as a result, we're not seeing the same focus. So this is the one to watch, I think, coming up is how the Chinese respond to the AI RAN side of things. And really, if as an industry, we can come to some sort of definition of what we mean. And we still haven't done that with virtual RAN versus cloud RAN and all that stuff. So I'm not particularly optimistic that we're going to have one AI RAN definition, which means it's either good for marketers or bad for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and actually, in a way, the AI for RAN developments, they are not just one thing, right? So they involve, quite a lot of, small improvements or small gains for the, I guess, the cyclist fans there. That was a theory that took up a few years ago. The marginal gains theory, right? That if you improve these and these and these and these and these very, very, very small things, then actually you start, if you add them up, you start having pretty significant improvements, right? And that's at least my understanding of what many of these AI RAN improvements actually play out, right? They're just kind of making little things more efficient, but then once you add them up, you get to these big numbers.
Yeah, and if we're talking about 100% gains in by 2028, right? That gives you time to add some of those things up. I would remind everyone that Ineos is no longer the sole title sponsor of their cycling team. So those marginal, so the story of those marginal gains that they were so fond of driving. Yeah, I'm sure it has nothing to do with that. Story that didn't get picked that we want to talk about, so we can keep moving. Is the one that actually I want to talk about, and I think this was the more interesting one, and in part is because I also tend to focus a lot on this, was a story around ISAC. You talked a bit about their sort of the Ericsson of it all with what they were talking about in terms of the memory side of things. This was some news from Ericsson alongside AT&T, where they talked about doing a demo of ISAC over 5G. I appreciate that they called out that this was done at AT&T Stadium outside Dallas during a major international sporting event, which will remain nameless. I guess I just do you have to pay royalties? Like, do you have to pay an enormous amount of money just if you use the name of FIFA and World Cup in your announcement? Maybe I don't know, but that's my assumption, at least, given that the announcement was in July, and it was all about drones, about drone detection, tracking drones, and really the big news there is that we were doing it with 5G. We talk a lot about ISAC as a 6G technology. That seems to be a big focus of it, one of the big use cases for 6G. But the story here was right. Hey, we're doing this right now. I've got my own thoughts on why I think this is particularly important, but your view before I go off on my tangent.
Yeah, no. So I mean, the fact that it was actually already, you know, tested with the existing technology, that was a bit of a surprise to me, and I'd be keen to hear your thoughts on that, Peter, which I'm sure you do have. Um, that that aside, I mean, I guess what makes this, even it's, with 5G advanced or with 6G more probably we will start seeing some of these technologies being available. I mean, there is the potential, I guess, advantages that, having or being able to reuse an existing network to actually develop sensing technologies, right? That actually seems like, and this announcement here with 5G already, further talks into that, right? We're talking about, just finding or trying to develop new applications and technologies that can have a commercial viability for telcos. So I think that's interesting from a, I guess, more business perspective. The question as to whether there are plenty of business opportunities out there or demand for these sort of sensing use cases, it's TBD, right? So, I mean, we can think all of security applications, maybe transport as well. But how much are people actually prepared to pay? And even if they're prepared to pay, is that going to be sort of enough for, the quite likely big investments that telcos need to put in place, right, for this to work? So yeah, I mean, lot of questions, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, I
But
think I
I'm
think
sure
the
you've got
drones
some
of it
answers.
all. I think as you said, the drones of it all is undeniable. So I think clearly we can get the idea. There's a war going on where drones are the primary battle vehicle that's taking place. Against that backdrop, with continuing worries around terrorism, especially around major events, it makes sense, right? But can we go beyond drones? You're right. That's number one question. I think for me, the interesting part here is two things. One, and this also took place at the same time as Ericsson got listed as a supplier to the UK Tactical Comm Systems Framework for public sector procurement. So this does point to this sort of overlap between telecoms, public sector telecoms, military and defense spending, how we actually see those networks. And if we look at it, we talk to operators and we ask them and this is from our operator survey, where we ask them about their B2B services, and we ask them what's the number one vertical that you're selling into. It is public sector, right? So this is a space they know. Defense is the other one. I think this is just another highlight, right? Ericsson, AT&T getting there saying, hey, here's a cool use case where, yeah, drone detection clearly a focus for defense. Clearly the idea that if you're AT&T and can say exactly to your point, right? If you can leverage the network, I think they said the announcement, hey, if you can expand this across your whole 5G footprint, pretty cool, pretty quick what you can do there. And the quick part, that's the last part for me, which I think was interesting and why this was a bit of a important piece of news where it's maybe not as clear, is that if you look back a few weeks ago, there was an announcement from Cohere Technologies with the U.S. Department of Defense's Future G program. That's the Tom Rondeau program, looking to drive new technologies, leverage commercial technologies in support of mission first agendas and priorities. And they announced this deal with Cohere to help develop some ISAC capabilities. And it's very clear if you look at the announcement says, look, we need something that works not way into the future, but something that we can start taking advantage of
Mhm.
sooner rather than later. It was all about giving money to an innovator to help develop solutions that they can leverage on existing networks with their multi-G technology, as they call it. Um, And I remembered when we talked about this when the news came out a few weeks ago in the podcast, and I said, I get it, right? This makes sense. They're trying to invest, but is this also a bit of a message to everyone else to say, hey guys, we want this soon. Don't sort of rest on your laurels. Think about developing something. It's hard not to see this from an AT&T and an Ericsson to go, oh yeah, a couple of weeks ago, you guys said you needed something very quick and you spent 28 million to help develop that. Here you go. We got it. Here's a demo for you. Now, I think a couple of weeks apart from each other, and it's hard not to see that connection. What I don't think
Mhm.
we know yet is, what is 6G ISAC going to deliver then that 5G ISAC can't? I hope it's, we're going to need to see more explanation of that. What is a technology like Cohere developing going to do better than what you can do on an existing 5G network? We're going to need to hear that. But I think it all comes back to your point, which is beyond drones. Beyond tracking drones, which maybe you can also use cameras for and radar and other things, what are the use cases that are going to drive this? Because it can't just be that single drone use case, and we're going to need to see more of what that is. So that's why I think this is particularly interesting because there's so many different pieces there.
Yeah, absolutely.
What else? On the road, we're now at that last part for on the road and on our minds. Neither of us are on the road anytime soon because summer holidays are coming up and much of Europe shuts down. The World Cup is over. Congratulations, I would say. I would be careful because the FIFA bylaw is not well known. There's a week for the host country to decide if they want to overturn the results. So I would warn all of your compatriots to not start celebrating. I will say that if you saw the halftime show, uh, uh, Shakira looked in. I trust Shakira's future much more than Madonna's. Madonna, I don't think could even walk. She was on. I mean, I think she's famously said she no longer has knees or ankles or something for dancing in high heels. Shakira was out there without shoes. She's protecting her future. So good for your fellow Barcelonan. Uh, Fair to say it was actually. Oh, last piece for me. You've also cemented soccer, football as something that Americans will not like because this was the classic. It went 100 and how many? Like there put probably tons of people around that. Wait, I had to sit for 2 hours and one person scored. One person scored once over the course of 2 hours, and we're all excited for that. It is the antithesis of what Americans like as a. But congratulations, it was a well fought.
Yeah, no, and yeah, it's been and it continues to be a complicated road to make football mainstream American sport. But I do have the feeling that this time around, there have been actually some further successes there. I mean, I think seeing your president actually already deciding that the next World Cup will not take place in Spain, Portugal, and Morocco as it's planned, but it might actually take place again in the US because the US can do it better than anyone else. That was actually a pretty telling sign for me.
I hope. I mean, I hope Morocco hasn't gotten too far with its high-speed rail between high-speed rail connecting all the big cities. So that will be that's like I said, you got to give it at least a week to see if it remains in Spain. Last last piece of news for me, and I will bet you this is something that this is not an AI podcast, but I think like so much of everything that everyone does nowadays, everything is AI related. And so I think the last piece of news for me is sort of on my minds versus on the road is something that, and I'm guessing, Pau, this is something that you're not even on your radar, and it probably shouldn't be, but new Chinese model, Kimi K3. And I will say, I'll be honest, when I first heard of Kimi K3, it sounded like a Love Island character or something similar of a reality TV show contestant. But it's technically, I should say technically, it's essentially, let's say, 18 months after the DeepSeek R1 model came up and we all started to freak out and the world was like, whoa, 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 look what's going on in China and at a fraction of the cost. feels like we're going through that again with a new model from a Chinese company called Moonshot. Um, Open source, not necessarily much lower cost, at least as I understand it, but performance is up there with some of the frontier models, at least per people who check on these things. And the interesting thing is, yeah, so it's 18 months after we've gone through this whole thing with DeepSeek. Obviously, in the last 18 months, trade wars have continued. Geopolitics have not gotten any less heated. So it does put that sort of, it's a reminder of how these things progress. For me, I think the interesting part is, and this is something that I don't know that I don't know there's a good answer to, but it's probably something we're going to need to start looking into. And I've heard this from some of our operator customers is how much do you actually need, particularly from a telco perspective, to do what we want to do? Right. So let's go back to, we're talking about the AI RAN side of things and how you may be able to improve some network performance with these technologies. Do they need to be continuing to evolve at an exponential level month after month after month? And do I need the latest and greatest and fastest and best? Or at some point, is good enough good enough? And I think that's, for me, I think an interesting question there of, as you've got the open AIs and you've got the Anthropics and you've got Googles and you've got everyone else there who's competing and rolling out new models that are better than the last week after week after week, at what point it's interesting because it's not like when we talk about sort of quantum. We're on the quantum side of things. We go, well, we're here, but we need to get to here, right? We're at a point where we have some basic capabilities, but we know to really do what we want to do, we've got to get here. With AI, it seems like we're doing really cool things right now with these models, and next week we're going to have a new model that's going to even be a lot better, and the week after that. But for me, it puts into perspective. And again, I've had these conversations with some of our operator members going, how much do we need to get caught up in that? I don't know. Is there a way to evaluate that from your perspective? Are we just going to get caught up in this, or is there a way to sort of break out of that from our perspective and go, this is what we need and enough is enough?
Well, it's really down. I mean, it's a very almost philosophical question, right? As in, and we do get asked the same question as well when it comes to the quality of telecom networks. So it's not just an AI question, as in how good AI models need to be. We have similar discussions, say in the European context, for example, around actually, but we have good quality networks already. Yes, they're not as good as they are in other parts of the world, but hey, it's not so bad, right? So I think it's a question of what do you want these technologies to support and unlock, and many times it's not clear, right? Because we're kind of talking about supporting or the underlying infrastructure and capabilities that support innovation in things that we cannot define. And if you take a sort of a too short-termish look at things, say, well, actually, that's what we have is good enough, but that might be more a question of one being unimaginative rather than not thinking or not thinking through sufficiently through into the future. So I know I'm not giving you a straight answer, but
No.
is.
There probably is no good answer to it. It's interesting to see if I'm in fintech or I'm in something where having the greatest model is going to give me a competitive advantage because it's marginally better, but I can translate those marginal improvements into a real bottom line result. I get it. I think if I am an operator where I am looking at AI as a tool to help drive efficiencies or roll out services more efficiently, it's a little bit of a different model. And I don't think anyone in the industry, like, I don't think anyone's quite figured out where that is, but the getting caught up in all of this. And again, to the point of, we haven't figured this out. If you haven't seen it yet, we just released last week our latest piece of research on sort of the AI token economy, tokenomics, call it what you want, uh, about some of the barriers and obstacles to think about, and the fact that we're still working through some of these basic use cases. There is no good answer, I don't think. So We just need to keep asking the questions.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, we've got no answers for you. Will Spain continue to be the World Cup champion next week? Will we be back in the U.S. In 4 more years for World Cup 2030? Will any of these AI models really be necessary? We don't have answers, but tune in to watch us discuss more of them next week. Thank you, Pau. Appreciate all of your input on this, and I'm sure we'll have you back again. Thanks to everyone for joining us, and tune in again next week.